Welcome back. As you can see, I just finished watching episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Thank you for actually returning to watch the rest of my reviews, because I want to try to change the way people view Star Wars, and it's from a writer's perspective. So I took a few notes, so I'm not talking around like I did the first time. And the first thing I want to talk about is the character archetypes that I could pick out. There's multiple different types of characters that could fit these roles. It just depends on the way you watch the movie, and that's what I loved about this movie, is it depends on how you watch it, on how good it is. For me, there was no central character, there was no protagonist. With this being the Skywalker saga, you would assume that it was Anakin, but he doesn't get introduced until Act 2, and you can't do that whenever you're trying to establish a central character. As far as writing and as far as storytelling goes, you want to have him as early as possible, and it's always in the first act. So it really can't be Anakin. The person that's the good side, the protagonist type of side, would be Qui-Gon, because he fits the time stamp on how long you want the protagonist to be in it. But again, it's hard for me to put him as the protagonist, and the same with Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan didn't fit the timestamp, and he didn't really do much of the storytelling. So it's hard to pinpoint the central character, but it doesn't need to be. Because with the way the Jedi are and how big and how massive the Order is, I think that George Lucas is wanting to establish that this is the Jedi Order. The Jedi Order is the protagonist in this movie. Even though it is focused around a master and an apprentice, it's only focused around those two. This is supposed to be, this is what the Jedi Order is. That is what this movie is to me, is it is the Jedi Order. I put Jar Jar as the shapeshifter because he does the most changing. He starts out as somebody that is thrown aside from his society and his community to where now he is a general. Because of what he's done to mend the brokenness between the Gungans and the Naboo, then now you see them coming together, and it's because of him. Which is why I hate the backlash on Jar Jar. It's because he might not have been a major character going forward. He was a very big plot device in this movie. Qui-Gon to me was the trickster / mentor. Trickster only because he didn't go with the Jedi. He was against the Jedi in many ways. As Obi-Wan even points it out, saying, if you would just follow the Jedi Order, or the Jedi Council, you would be a part of the Council. But he doesn't. But he also mentors Obi-Wan, so that's why I put him down as the mentor character. Obviously, Darth Maul and Darth Sidious are the shadows, or the antagonist, whatever you want. Even though it's really going up against the Trade Federation, so the Trade Federation could very much fill this role as well. The mentors to me were the Jedi Council. Even though you saw very little of them, they were mentoring and telling people, this is what we got to do, this is where we got to go, that type of stuff. Anakin to me fit the higher self, because that's all he really wanted. He wanted to be better than just a slave. He wanted to go see the stars, go be the first person to see them all, kind of stuff. So his character arc, if you will, in this movie is becoming higher than what he is. And yeah, Boss Nass to me was the Threshold Guardian, which pretty much assures as when there's something new coming up, it's usually him that is being the reason it happens. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan need to escape and get safe passage to Naboo. Alright, cool, here's a speeder. Even though he was mind tricked into it, he still got it. And then at the end, we need an army. Alright, here's my army. So he was the Threshold Guardian to me. A lot of people said that Padme and Anakin were flirting. I think Anakin was flirting, but Padme was just being a good friend, if that makes sense. She does, whenever Anakin gives her the pendant, say that, I don't need this to remember you by, because I'll always care for you. You can care for your neighbor, you can care for your co-workers, you can care for anyone as deeply as you would as anybody else. You don't necessarily have to have feelings for them. So I don't think she was flirting. I think she was being more giving of help to him and wanting more for him. Not necessarily a relationship, if that makes sense. I felt that Jake Lloyd as an actor was the only one really giving emotion. I know that the Jedi weren't supposed to, because they're supposed to be emotionless type people, so it's understandable for like Qui-Gon, even though he does a little bit, Obi-Wan every now and again. But I could have seen more from Shmi. whenever she was giving Anakin away, she never really showed the emotion that I was looking for as a viewer. That she should, like, I understand she's trying to be strong for Anakin, but she could have given more to that moment. Padme was the same way. She could have given more. And this isn't a slight on these actors. I'm just feeling that these roles were limited to in the writing, which could have been fleshed out with a better director. And even George Lucas has come out and says he's not the best director. He wanted Steven Spielberg to direct this movie, but like I said in the last video, everyone was saying, this is your baby, you do it. The story structure hit the proper timestamps for me that I was seeing. The end of Act 1 happened around 30 minutes into the movie, which is where it usually happens. And then Act 2 was giving you about 20 to 30 minutes towards the end to wrap everything up. So the timestamps did hit, and in the right moments. The obstacles part of the narrative was kind of rushed, in my eyes, which is just before you see them gearing up to go to war. All those moments after Anakin goes to meet with the council, up until them actually on that field with, or the Gungans on that field, was all the obstacles to me, and it just didn't fit. It was rushed to me. I feel Obi-Wan taps into the dark side, which I feel isn't really spoken upon a lot whenever he kills Darth Maul. It's not just because he kills him. It is what it is. It's just you saw the anger in his eyes. You saw the anger flowing through him, and that is a very much dark side and Sith type tactic, which is what threw Darth Maul off. And even though Darth Maul was constantly setting up Obi-Wan to kill him the exact same way he just did Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan just cuts his thing in half. That's why the choreography was kind of repetitious at that point, was because you see Darth Maul trying to push and offset Obi-Wan so he can hit him in the face and do a backslash and stab him. There was a nice callback to Episode 4 at the ending with the long corridor. You see the celebration. You see Boss Nass hold up the orb and say peace. That is very much Han and Luke getting their medals. I feel that the story definitely moved well. And actually with no protagonist, it moved in a certain direction. You saw the direction. It was a good direction. And even though that you could say that having a protagonist would benefit this movie, I'm not necessarily saying that. It's up for debate. The motives of the Trade Federation were very apparent throughout the entire thing. All they wanted was them to sign the treaty. That is what they wanted. That was their goal. That was everything. And the only way that you can say that there was a motive for the protagonist was Padme's motive to not sign the treaty, get them off her planet, and save her people. But again, she's not really the protagonist, is she? Because to me, this story was the Jedi Order about to fall and showing their arrogance, even though they're not supposed to be. And that's what this movie does. If I was to improve this movie, I would just start it where Anakin was already a Padawan. You don't necessarily need him to meet Padme at this moment. You don't necessarily need to see him meet Obi-Wan and all the memes that come out of this movie. You don't necessarily need it. All you need is him meeting Padme, because that is who he fell in love with. That is who he had Luke and Leia with. So that was something that had to happen. Or anyone, whoever the love interest, because it really wasn't stated in the original trilogy. But everything that you learned in this movie about Anakin could definitely come up with him just being a Padawan. Him being good with mechanics, him being an awesome fighter pilot, him being attuned with the Force. It was, this movie to me, if you look at the entire, I don't really want to touch on this too much, but because that's another video. If you really look at this trilogy, it's broken up into the 3 acts of a typical hero's journey. And this was the ordinary world, if you will. This was giving out the exposition, and that's why it just didn't have everything that we needed necessarily, but it did establish Anakin. So if you look at it in that way, maybe you can say Anakin is the protagonist of this movie. But as a movie, as a standalone movie, if this was not a part of Star Wars, I would probably give this a 6 out of 10, because the visuals were pretty good. I didn't really have a problem with Jar Jar. I hate the backlash. You saw or heard me in the last video that I didn't really care for the backlash of Jar Jar. I actually liked him as a character. And it's just one of those things to where this movie could have done a little bit better, but not by a massive degree. Doesn't need to get better, because this is what we got. And this is what we have to talk about. So I'd say if I was you and you haven't watched episode 1 in forever because of the fan backlash or because you might have had a bad viewing the first time and you just didn't like it, give it another chance. Because it is something that sets something up bigger than just what you know from the original trilogy. It does set that up and in a nice way, and it was a fun movie. Remember, these movies are for kids. So they're going to be fun, they're going to be lighthearted. The only thing I would say that needed to be cleaned up a lot was the dialogue. Not necessarily the what they were saying, but the amount of dialogue that was in it. There was just an overabundance of dialogue that doesn't necessarily need to be there, so it was oversaturated with it. And I feel that that's what gets people, was the oversaturation of dialogue. Thank you for coming to my little video. I will try to release these daily. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, if you feel that I was not making good points, please feel free to comment and tell me what I could improve on. Thank you.